started following Will Wheaton on social media because I have a Wesley Crusher sweater in the backlog of iconic sweaters to make. I wanted to see if he ever talked about the costuming on The Next Generation. And then he posted this amazing piece, and I just have to see if I can recreate it. This sweater has a lot of lore. It was, or maybe still is, part of a social experiment where the owner took photos of different people wearing it over the years. So there are a lot of photos of it online. We should be able to figure out how it was constructed. So let's take a look. So this is the photo that Will Wheaton posted on social media, and here it is on his blog. From this photo, we can see that this is a fairly loose knit, and it's got this interesting boat neckline with ribbing at the top. And this fluffy stuff is interesting. It looks like it's supposed to be like the hair for the clown, but it's on the sleeves. And there's something interesting about the texture of the mouth here, but I'm not quite sure what that is. So let's take a look at the photos on the Clown Sweater website. Here's a higher quality and closer up photo, and we can see that the fuzzy stuff in the red is a technique called pile knitting. But this is clearly a bulky knit, and it looks like the texture on the mouth is just purl stitches, so I will have to go through and reform stitches to make this. But this is intarsia. You can tell it's intarsia and not like 2 or 3 color jacquard, because if it were jacquard you'd see bleed through of the other color in the background, and we don't see that. And then we have the reverse, the purl side stuff on the nose as well. Does it just go straight up? Hold on. I'm not seeing, oh there it is. So there's a little bit of underarm bind off there. This is probably a set-in sleeve. Yeah, so the base of this is a pretty basic sweater. Let me see how I can make this with the tools that I have on hand. So let's go over what we know about this sweater. It is set-in sleeve. It's got a boat neck with some ribbing at the top. The sleeves have pile knitting on the top to make the hair for the clown. It's a fairly loosely knit, bulky sweater. And the front is done in intarsia with the purl side for the nose and the lips. So I have a bulky knitting machine with an intarsia carrot, so I should be able to make the front of it, and I can always reform the stitches from knit stitches to purl stitches. And I have a set-in sleeve crew neck pattern that I believe I can modify to get the boat neck. For the pile knitting, it's not possible to do pile knitting like easily on the Brother machine that I have. I need to dig through Alessandrina's blog and see if I can find something. If you're not familiar with Alessandrina, she has this amazing blog. She posts different ways to do specific techniques on different kinds of machines, and I think she's talked about pile knitting before, so I need to dig through, and there will be links to all of this in the description. And I have a few colors of Nordic tam yarn that'll work on my bulky. I don't have any pink, but I do have a couple different pinkish colors in a thinner yarn. I have this fuchsia and I have this like dark reddish color. I might just use 2 strands of this for the mouth because it's going to take a long time to get more tam yarns because they ship from, where do they ship from? Indiana? Idaho? Somewhere. So it's time to do some swatching. So we have swatches. I have some plain old gauge swatches to make sure I have the right tension for my main yarn because most of the sweater is going to be this white color. I did a test using the intarsia carriage and reforming stitches, and it's doable. When I want to reform a column into purl stitches, I will have to reset the needles, form the column, and then pull the needle back out. It's not that difficult, so this is doable, but I'm not sure I like the pink and the red in there. I might just go with the pink and have the lips of this clown be bright. It fits with the spirit of the sweater. And then pile knitting. So this was my first attempt. This was using Alessandrina's technique from a specific blog post for how to do this on Brother machines. She wants to do the main knitting on the ribber and then just use the main bed to form the loops. But I've never been able to get a ribber to like really knit on its own without something going on in the main bed, so I suspect that's what's going on here. I modified her technique a little bit to do the main knitting on the main bed and have the ribber form the loops. It makes the pile happen on the wrong side of the fabric. So what I'm going to have to do with the sleeve is knit up to where the pile starts, take it off on waste yarn and flip it around and put it back on. So I can do this and it'll be on the right side. And like I had a needle that didn't want to knit correctly, so I had to replace that. But it's pretty close to what I want. And I did some tests to see if increasing and decreasing was possible. It's not easy, it's not great. On the clown sweater, it looks like the pile starts at about the elbow. And then up from there, I might just start at the underarm and go up from there, because from the underarm up, there are only decreases, there are no increases, and the increases on this are not, they're not pretty. And it's not going to make a nice seam. And then I also attempted short rows at the top because the sleeve has some short row shaping at the top to get it to round out. Not great, and I wound up dropping some stitches on this side. So I'm not going to skip the short rows at the top entirely because then the sleeve is not going to be shaped the way that I want it to. So, but I might like not do as many short rows as I would otherwise. And this is 2 passes for every row, so I will need to update my pattern to take that into account. And I will let y'all know when we get to this point how I modified Alessandrina's instructions to do this. The sleeves start with a few inches of ribbing. This is the standard brother ribbing cast on with 2 rows of circular knitting. And then I cancel the circular knitting and keep going. This is my Brother 270 bulky knitting machine, and yes, it has been gutted for AYAB reasons. There's more information about that in the description. Then I'm going to transfer all of the stitches to the main bed for stockinette. Then I'm going to drop the ribber, hang some edge weights, and continue knitting. I'm going to increase every few rows. I'm using my set in sleeve crewneck pattern here. There's a link in the description. While I'm working on the sleeve, let me tell you about this sweater. Will Wheaton was at a fundraiser for the EFF, and at the end of the night, someone asked him to wear this sweater, and a photo of it wound up on the internet. Every few years, it makes the rounds again. According to the Clown Sweater Project website, the owner found it at a thrift store in San Francisco in the late 90s, and started taking the sweater and a camera to events and photographing people wearing it. And then in 2002, they brought it to the EFF fundraiser and got a photo of Will Wheaton, and now here we are. So it was an early meme in the infancy of the internet. That EFF fundraiser was at the DNA Lounge, which is a club in San Francisco that I've been to quite a few times. I used to compete in their Cocktail Robotics Grand Challenge, a bartending robot competition that we placed 3rd in one year. I'd still compete, but they haven't held it in a few years. Jamie, please make it happen! Okay, that's enough of a tangent. When I get to the underarm, I'm binding off a few stitches for the shelf. And the same for the other side. Then I need the right side facing me for the pile knitting, so I'm taking this off on the waist yarn so I can turn it around. I'm covering the bottom bed so the work doesn't get stuck in the needles and gate pegs, and then I'm rehanging the live stitches on the top bed. And my head is in the way, because point of view shots are really hard. I'm hanging weights now while the bottom bed is out of the way. And now it's time to pile knit. I'm setting both carriages to my main tension, and then the bottom bed for partial knitting in one direction, and the top bed to tuck in the other direction. Then putting the bottom bed in half pitch and selecting all the needles between the working needles on the top bed. Then we can start knitting. The first row is a bit of a struggle. You can see the needles on both beds have picked up yarn but have not knit. On the second pass, only the top bed knits and nothing happens on the bottom. Now we have to free the loops that have been created on the bottom bed. I'm pushing the needles all the way up, manually closing the latches and then pulling them back down. Then shoving the loops in between the beds so they're out of the way. This continues forever. The first pass creates the loops, The second pass secures them, and then the manual step releases them. I'm manually closing the latches because these loops are too loose to close them on their own. Decreases happen the same way that they always do. You just need to remember to move a needle from the bottom bed out of work when you're done. I decided that short rows were a little too tricky with this stitch, so I'm doing a progressive bind off for the sleeve head instead. Every row requires 2 passes of the carriage, so this is not as straightforward as it would be with plain old stockinette. At the end, I'm dropping the rubber down and doing my standard gate peg bind off. And we need 2 of these. On to the back. This also starts with 2 inches of ribbing. Then I transfer all the stitches to the main bed. Then drop the rubber down. Swap out the sinker plates. And keep knitting up until the underarm. Bind off for the shelf. I like to hold the flap down with a claw weight. Same thing on the other side. Then even decreases until we get to the shoulder width. Then knit straight up to the ribbing. Remember, we're skipping the neckline and shoulder shaping. Swap out the sinker plates. The ribber comes back up. Transfer every other stitch to the bottom bed for ribbing. And then don't do what I did. I left an extra needle selected, and it leaves this big loop, and now I have to carefully unknit. And then carefully move the carriages back to the other side. There we go, now that's right. I'm leaving a long tail for a sewn bind off. And the whole thing comes off on waist yarn. There's the back panel. I'm removing the waist yarn from the cast on edge. And sewing the top edge closed. This is a lot like a Kitchener stitch. All right, let's take stock of where we are. I have 2 sleeves done, but these are fairly problematic because the pile, which I didn't find out in my swatch, but I have now found out now that I have a larger piece, this is not stable. Like, the loops will just pull out. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it. I ordered some fusible interfacing that's stretchy, and I might try to just interface the back and see if I can stick the loops down. But in its current state, I can't wash this because it's just going to fall apart in the wash and make a giant mess. So I think what I'm going to do is assemble everything and not put the sleeves on it and then wash it because there's something else going on here. This is the back piece, and it is way longer than I expected it to be. And I'm trying to just trust the process and trust that once I wash this, it's going to shrink up, it's going to change shape, because like this just came right off the machine, so it's all stretched out right now. But it is hitting me a few inches below my hips, and that's not quite what I want. But I'm trying to trust the process. All right, onto the front piece. The front is worked exactly the same way as the back, except for the pattern on the front. I knit the first few inches of ribbing, and now it's time to switch to the intarsia carriage. But first I need to remove the extra accessories. I also need to move the row counter. I have this machine disassembled because I've been working on AYAB support. There's more information about that in the description. The first pass of the intarsia carriage puts all of the needles in upper working position. After that, I can feed weights onto my strands of yarn and start manually placing them on the correct needles. The first few rows are just white. Eventually I'll get to the bottom of the mouth and start adding more colors. But where does this pattern come from? I recreated the clown face in a drawing program, scaled it to my gauge, and cleaned it up. And then fixed up some spacing issues. then I have a Python script that I wrote for another project that parses that image, tells me how many cakes of each color of yarn I need, and then gives me row by row instructions for where those colors need to be. And this is going a little slow because I can't count and I'm double checking with my computer. There's a link to the script in the description if you're the kind of person who can get a Python script up and running. I'd love to eventually turn this into a web utility, but I don't have the time and energy for that, and I won't for a long while. But it's just hours and hours of this, so let's do some time lapse. To get the pearl side texture on the mouth, when I get to a row where I know a new color is supposed to start, I stop and reform the stitches with my latch hook tool. This involves unraveling a column and then reforming them into knit stitches. And then resetting the needles. And then more careful yarn placement. Here's another angle on those reformed stitches. If you want more detail on this process, check out my Sleeve Island video. You can see some holes start forming here. These are half-formed stitches where I started a new strand of yarn. I will fix these when I weave in the ends. It's done. It's finally done. Well, there's no more intarsia to do. I need to finish off the top of this with ribbing, but my back hurts because I am old and I've been leaning over doing this for... I don't even know how long. It's been at least 8 hours, probably 10. And I don't want to screw it up at this point, so I'm gonna leave it and come back to it tomorrow. It's not that creepy, is it? I mean, it'll look better on the other side once I've woven the ends in, but it's finally done. The ribber goes back on for this last step. One pass of the main carriage to reset the needles. And then moving the row counter again. And I'm swapping out the sinker plates. then transferring every other needle to the bottom bed for 1x1 ribbing. Then the whole thing comes off on waste jarring. Oh god, that's terrifying. I'm using the same sewn bind off for the top ribbing. Now I have 12 million ends to weave in. It's not too terrifying, is it? I'm attaching the sides together with a mattress stitch. Now I need to sort out the shoulders. I'm pinning the very edge and then trying to see how much room I need to fit my head through the neckline. I'm adding the pupils of the eyes with a duplicate stitch. Maybe. I can't seem to figure out how to do it on camera. But of course, it was completely possible when no one was watching. I have put the body of the sweater in the wash to block it and turn it into its final shape because there's a problem with the sleeves, and I'm concerned that the sleeves are just going to fall apart in the wash. So I'm not going to show you on the sleeve itself, but looking at my test swatch, loops just pull out. They're not stable, they're not secured in there in anywhere. So I have acquired some Heat and Bond soft stretch. This is a form of interfacing. Interfacing is used in sewing to stabilize things and make them a little bit thicker so they don't stretch and they don't get out of shape, and it gives your garments a little more heft. But this is specifically for stretch things, and as far as I can tell, it's like this non-woven glue layer that is a little bit stretchy, but it's meant to be used to like attach patches to knits and things that move around a bit, so it's sticky on both sides, and it's actually got a paper backing. But I tested it both on a plain old swatch, and it does stretch a little bit. Not a whole lot, like you can see, definitely see where the patch is there. And on my test swatch, I added a little bit. And in this location, the loops don't pull out because the glue layer that you iron on is holding them insecure. And it's like starting to break down a little bit. So I'm gonna have to be careful with the sweater, and I'm probably not gonna be able to put it in the dryer because the stuff melts when it gets warm. I could probably put a lightweight knit fabric backing, but I think it'll be okay. I think it'll be okay if it just doesn't go in the dryer. So, works fine on my test piece. It's time to interface the actual sleeves. And let me fix up the loops before I do that because they're not all in good shape. I'm removing the waste yarn so it doesn't get in the way. And then I'm cutting out a piece of interfacing that is slightly smaller than the sleeve head. Don't use your nice scissors for this, the glue is a little sticky. I'm pinning the top of the sleeve head into my ironing board to keep it flat. And then I'm flattening out the rest of my sleeve with these lovely pattern weights. Then I'm following the directions on the packaging for this interfacing. The goal is to melt the glue but not the yarn. I found a few edges that weren't quite stuck down, so I went back over them again. When I peeled the paper backing up, there were still a few spots that weren't quite adhered. I didn't really have the iron hot enough for this interfacing because I was trying not to melt the yarn. And here it is, all interfaced, and the loops don't pull out. Now I'm attaching the sleeve with a mattress stitch. I like to start at the armpit and work my way up. I left a little gap around the edge of the interfacing so I can get to these edge stitches. Oh, I did not think about the eye placement. Here's the final sweater. I have not blocked it since I put the sleeves on. Even with the interfacing in there, I'm concerned that they're going to fall apart in the wash, and I have a video to finish. If you want to know what happens if I try to wash this, let me know and I will make a follow-up. But it is wearable in this state. The scale of the face is a bit off, and I definitely could have made it shorter. And the way that I've reformed the stitches to make the mouth and the nose purl side out kind of hid the bottom black outline a bit. If I were to do this again, I would do that a little differently. But I think overall it captures the spirit of the original. What do you think? Is this a successful clown sweater? Is this a successful project? If there are any more iconic sweaters that you want me to make, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Happy knitting. Okay, too much rain.